everyone! If you were wondering how I've been doing, thanks for your concern. I'm feeling much better. Turns out all I needed was a little rest and a whole lot of drawing therapy. Oh, and maybe some chocolate. Definitely some chocolate. Now that I'm back to feeling like myself, I've got something amazing to share with you today. Have you ever wondered how to make your Procreate portraits look so realistic it might freak people out? Well, I discovered a trick that changed everything, and I can't wait to show you. Stick around because you're going to love this. Now, before we jump into shading, I wanted to quickly mention this. I've been studying proportions, and let me tell you, they're so important when drawing a portrait. If you don't get those basics down, your portrait might end up looking interesting to say the least. If you're curious about learning more about facial proportions and want me to make a whole video about it, let me know in the comments with a heart. Seriously, I'd love to deep dive into this topic for you. But for today, let's focus on something else. The real secret to making your portraits pop. It's all about the shading, and Procreate makes it so much easier to create realistic textures and depth. Ready? Let's dive in. Alright, let's get into the real secret of creating realistic shading in Procreate. I know shading can feel intimidating, but trust me, it's all about simplifying the process. For this portrait, I kept it straightforward. I used the same brush for shading and smoothing. That's right. No fast brush hopping, just one reliable brush to block in the shadows, blend them and refine the details. It keeps things consistent and saves so much time. Here's where Procreate really shines. The color picking tool. I used it to pick colors directly from my reference photo. This ensures I'm working with accurate tones, especially for tricky areas like midtones and subtle highlights. It's like having a cheat sheet for realistic shading. With the color picker, I could quickly match the tones in my reference photo and smoothly transition between shadow and light areas. And because I stuck with one brush, the blending process was super seamless. When I needed to soften transitions, I just went over the edges with a lighter pressure on the same brush. No smudge tool necessary. It's all about how you control the brush strokes. As I kept building up the layers of shading and highlights, I kept referencing my photo and tweaking the tones. The color picker was my best friend here. It's so easy to grab just the right shade and keep the portrait looking cohesive. At this stage, the portrait really started to feel alive. The shadows gave it depth, and the highlights added that extra dimension. And finally, I used some subtle color adjustments to polish the overall look. This is the step where it all clicks, the moment your portrait transforms from good to wow. Now let's pause for a second and talk about why shading is so important, not just in Procreate, but in the world of drawing overall. Shading is the heartbeat of any realistic artwork. It's what gives your drawing depth, dimension, and life. Without shading, even the most accurate sketch can feel flat and lifeless. Think about it. Shading tells the story of light. It shows where the light is coming from, how it interacts with your subject, and how it shapes the features. It's the difference between a portrait that feels like a real person and one that feels like a basic outline. And here's something many artists overlook. Shading isn't just about adding darkness. It's also about highlighting the light. When you carefully balance shadows and highlights, you create contrast. And contrast is what grabs attention. It's what makes your art stand out and feel alive. When you master shading, you unlock the ability to evoke emotions in your viewers. Soft shadows can make a portrait feel calm or mysterious. Strong contrast can make it feel dramatic or intense. It's like you're a director of light, setting the mood for your artwork. So how do you take your shading game to the next level? Here are a few tips I've learned. Understand your light source. Always understand by figuring out where the light is coming from. It doesn't have to be complicated. Just a single consistent light source can create stunning effects. Think in layers. Don't try to get it perfect in one go. Build your shadows and highlights gradually. Start with soft, broad tones and then refine the details as you go. Blend smart, not hard. Use light pressure and consistent strokes to blend your shadows. And remember, you don't need a ton of brushes. Mastering just one can give you amazing results. Don't forget about reflected light. Shadows aren't always just dark. In real life, light bounces off nearby surfaces, creating softer, lighter tones within the shadows. Adding this subtle detail can make your portrait feel even more realistic. Shading is an art form in itself. It's not just a step in the process. It's the soul of your drawing. Whether you're working in Procreate or traditional media, the principles are the same. Light, contrast, and patience are your best friends. And remember, the more you practice shading, the more you'll develop your own unique style. So don't stress if it feels tricky at first. Every stroke you make is a step closer to mastering it. Alright, let's circle back to the star of the show. This absolutely adorable girl with the cutest little gap-toothed smile. She's missing 2 teeth, and honestly, that's what makes this portrait so special. It's such a small detail, but it adds so much personality to the piece. When I first saw the reference photo, I couldn't help but smile. There's something so pure and endearing about it. And I knew immediately that I had to draw her. It's these little quirks, like missing teeth or a unique expression, that makes a portrait stand out. They tell a story without saying a word. This is also a great reminder for all of us as artists. Don't shy away from imperfections. Sometimes it's those imperfections that make a portrait feel real. They're what make the subject relatable and human. Drawing her little smile was one of my favorite parts of this portrait. I wanted to make sure the shading around her mouth captured the softness and charm of her expression. And those missing teeth, they're what give her character. This portrait has been such a joy to work on. From the little details in her smile to exploring the shading techniques that bring her to life. I hope you've enjoyed this journey with me and maybe even picked up a few tips for your own art along the way. I also hope my videos are helping you overcome art block or creative block. I know how frustrating it can be to feel stuck, but remember, even taking small steps like watching a tutorial or trying out a new technique is progress. You've got this. If you're inspired to try drawing portraits, remember, have fun with it. Don't aim for perfection, aim for personality. And if you're still curious about the basics of proportions or other drawing fundamentals, drop a heart in the comments and I'll make a future video just for that. Thanks for hanging out with me today, and don't forget to like, comment and subscribe if you want more fun, creative content like this. And as always, happy drawing!